Good morning, everyone. I'm Ryan Setzer, and I'd like to say thank you to the young professionals group with the Community Association Institute. I'd like to thank Scott and 6'2" for giving me the opportunity to be here with you and share some important information and some important strategies on communication skills. I'm going to do some screen sharing today. We'll have some PowerPoints up with you. Now, we'll give you a kind of a precursor. Let me give you a little background on me. I have had that question, who are you? And that's a good question I've asked for many, many years myself. I think I might have figured it out at one point. Just a background of my professional career and life. I actually started off at age 19 involved in pro boxing and pro kickboxing. I know it's an interesting career choice to start with, but it was actually very interesting and put me in a lot of situations with a lot of very good professional people at a high level. So it forced me in a situation where I had to learn to do things differently and look at it differently to survive in many cases. I had a 6-year pro career, 22 wins, 4 losses, and 17 knockouts, which means I could hit real hard. I was too stupid to lay down primarily. But I did learn that that skill set doesn't translate into the real world. You can't punch your way to success in the real world. You end up going to jail, where you'll probably end up dancing with people you don't want to dance with. So I had to learn some new skills. One was communication, and I evolved into sales. Right out of the box, I was thrown into selling copiers and faxes. And this is new technology. This is old technology for us now, but it was new technology then. So it involved educating people and communicating with people dynamically about something they'd never seen or never thought about. And that's where my passion for the theory of communication kind of really started. That evolved into actually a speaking career where I traveled the country with the companies like Fred Pryor, Skill Path, national seminars, had my own company, wrote a book with my partner on medical management and dealing with the people side of the coin. I specialized in dealing with difficult and challenging people and employees, and that absolutely is a communication-based topic. So now, as a real estate investor for the last 12 years, I've developed a real estate rental portfolio that covers 3 states and has multiple properties in each. I manage managers for that primarily and have to deal with that on a regular basis. And more importantly, I've now become a licensed CAM in the state of Florida, and I am on the ground like everybody else, managing a portfolio of properties for Associa Gulf Coast over in the St. Pete area, and my properties are in Tampa. They're a combination of commercial and residential, and that gives me a good variety of exposure and experience in how things work correctly and incorrectly very easily, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to do some screen sharing today with PowerPoint. We did include a handout. I'm kind of old school meeting new world. I believe there are ways that you communicate. We learn historically, the research shows we learn by hearing, seeing, and doing. So I like to give a handout. Now, a lot of people look at it on their phone and will not have printed it, and I get it. There are fill in the blanks. I believe that you mentally commit to the conversation and the interaction in many cases if you're jotting notes or taking things down, actively involved. So there's your first tip of the day relative to being more effective as a communicator. Occasionally, particularly in situations on the phone, I mean, obviously internet and emails a little differently, but on the phone or in person, you might want to write this down. Here's something you may want to write down. When you suggest that they may want to write it down, it automatically gains an importance level. And when something's important to you, we tend to remember it. If it's not important, if it's important to somebody else, it may not be something that you can relate to. So you want to give it some importance. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and do my screen sharing. We're going to get our PowerPoint going here, and we'll go through this for the next 40 minutes or so. I'll try to open up some lines and do some question and answers. If not, you'll be chatting with Scott, and Scott will try to cue me as we go along here, and raise your hand if you need to ask or say something. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible. Again, our program is Communication Strategies for Young Professionals. I like my subtitle from the standpoint of the art and science of sharing the message, because that's really what I want to do today. I want to share the art and science of sharing a message with other people, particularly in your business environment. First thing I'd like to do is I'd like to define communication. It's very important when you're dealing with people. We'll talk about this at the very end, especially with our strategies, is setting expectations and establishing definitions. English is complex. We'll speak about that in a few moments. But defining communication is important. Let's start with what it is. It's on your handout on page number 2. Communication is essentially the exchange of information that leads to increased understanding. And that's the goal of it. Communicating, sharing your sound, making sound, sharing symbols, doing whatever we do for the purpose of our own good is really not communication. That's just us pontificating. We want to make certain that the people we're involved with are actually understanding it from the way we see it and the way we want it. So it is creating a better situation and a better understanding when you're doing communication. Now, there are some factors that do affect this right out of the box. The 2 most important factors that affect communication, positively or negatively, are your attitude and then behaviors. Now, I know a lot of people are going to go, well, my attitude is just fine. It's the other people's attitude that's the problem. Absolutely. I get that. And we'll talk about how to influence that as we go along. But right now, let's talk about first your attitude and your behavior, because I believe the world is inside out, not outside in. If it's inside out, I've got a lot more control over what I do and how I tend to deal with it. If it's outside in, and that's the way I look at it, I'm always in the tank simply because I don't have a lot of control over those things outside of me. I might have some influence, but I have very little control, but I have all the control of what's inside me. So let's talk about our attitude. What is your attitude relative to communication? Your attitude is essentially the internal vision of the external world. It's your inner view of the outside world. And that does color how you see the world. It absolutely creates the behaviors, or it certainly influences the behaviors that are going to happen as you enter into something. My dad was a prime example of how your attitude affected reality. In my entire life, I never remember him saying he ever received good customer service anywhere he went. And when you talk to him for a little while, or you actually went out and interacted with him, you suddenly realize why he never got good customer service. He brought the fight with him. There was no question about it. He brought that argument with him. There was an attitude of expectation of negative situations, negative results. So the question is your attitude creating a positive environment to communicate with the parties you're working with, or are you carrying something with you? Now, your behavior is the way you express your feelings. The way you express your feelings in action. That's important to remember. If I've colored this picture inside my mind, it's probably going to look a lot like that picture in the real world when I express myself. What is my tone of voice? How is it going to work? How am I going to interact? What is my body language? You're going to look at all those different elements, because that affects the message and affects the environment in which you share your message. Now, there are 2 choices you can make when you're interacting with someone. The first is you react. The second is you respond. One would be positive. The other would be more negative. So let's take a look at the reaction versus the response. The reaction versus response. First off, a reaction is an act that essentially is prompted by an external stimulus. It's going to be the outside controlling you as opposed to the inside controlling you. When you act from an external catalyst or an external locus of control, at that point, it's instinctive, it's immediate, and it's usually done without thought. I'm going to tell you, it's those things that you're going to later have to beg for forgiveness or buy your way out of. So reaction is not necessarily the most positive route to take. Reacting instinctively, particularly. That's fight or flight. It's necessary sometimes, but you want to be more in control. That would be responding to this situation. How do you respond? You act by your choice. You think it through. It's intellect. You proact instead of react. You do it before it happens, and you make your decisions and you make your actions more deliberate as opposed to automatic or without thought. So you want to react versus respond. Now, this is how to manage anger, conflict, and emotion if you've ever been to one of those sessions. But I've come to realize if you don't have a good control over your own emotions, you don't have a good control over or a good feeling about yourself or your own attitude, all those self-image issues, attitude issues do affect the way you communicate. So I wanted to go over this theoretical part first, and then we'll go into some actual how-to techniques. There are 3 noise barriers that I believe work against you in the real world when you're trying to express yourself to someone else or share your message. Those barriers are, first, environmental noise. All the stuff that's happening around you. All those things that are banging and clicking, and people, if you're in an office environment, I know now it's a little challenging for the last couple of few weeks, but there's a lot of typing, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of phones ringing, there's a lot of environmental noise, there's people chatting behind you. You're going to have to block those things out and stay really focused. You have to have a strong mental disposition in order to communicate effectively. You got to be able to block out the ambient noise and stay focused on the specific message that you're trying to share and or you're trying to receive. Social noise. One of the biggest problems we have right now is in my hand and Facebook and social media and games and all that. It distracts us all day long. So social noise has to be controlled if you want to be effective at communicating. You just have to take charge of that environment. The last is mental noise, and this is a big one, probably the most important. You can control all the environmental noise, you can control all the social noise, you can turn things off, you can put things down, you can stay focused, but it's hard to shut off your own mind. It's probably not a good idea at some level, but it's hard to shut it off. Most of the noise we have when we're dealing with a situation, particularly in communication, is we're trying to respond to their presentation or their question or whatever before they actually finish. We've got mental chatter going on in our head that keeps us from hearing what they're actually saying. So you've got to shut your own talk down, your own chatter. You can't be trying to answer the question before they finish it. You've got to be able to stop yourself and stay focused on them and then deal with it properly. So talking to yourself is normal. You're not crazy. Talking to yourself while trying to listen to somebody else, trying to respond before they finish, is not productive. And that's what you want to think about when you're doing it. Stay focused. Stay focused on that. These all create filters. These all create the filters or barriers between you and the person you're dealing with, whether it be on the phone, whether it be internet, the email or internet, whether it would be face-to-face. There are filters. In other words, there's a intention. The sender has an intention. They're trying to share a message with you. And then there's your perception. The perception is, how did they receive it? Was the intention and the perception the same? Did they actually match up? Or was there some filter that changed it, took something out, kept something from coming through, changed the way it sounded, changed the way it was interpreted? Was one person speaking one language and the other person speaking another language? Is there a person speaking industrial jargon to a layman who's never heard of these words? So think about the filters, because you're going to have to control the filters as you move forward in your conversation. You're going to have to eliminate or reduce the issues that are created between your intent and your perception. Now, who really has the burden of that? This is probably one of my first and most important pieces of information that I hope you're going to get today. Number one, there's a cardinal rule in selling. There's a cardinal rule. The responsibility of sharing understanding is predominantly with the sender. Now, I know that doesn't sound normal, and every time I'm in an interaction with people that have situations with other individuals or in a management situation, or they can't seem to connect with a client, they always seem to blame it on the other person's inability. It's their it's their bad attitude. It's they've got a history and they don't want to hear anything new, or they've got a closed mind, or they're just a terrible listener. They don't listen to you. They want to tell you about stuff, but they don't want to listen to anything. And at that point, the sender has a responsibility of keeping control of that communication. So the burden of getting the message across is on the sender. I've heard people say they're not a good listener, and then I've listened to them speak, and I have to admit, yeah, you're not very good at sending a message. It's not compelling, it's not motivating, it's not inspiring. You have to reach out and grab them and bring them in and make it relate to their situations. So the sender has a burden at that point. Now, let's get into some actual techniques here as we go forward. We're going to deliver some communication. There are 3 C's to a complete communication cycle. They involve clarity, or being clear. Number 2 would be being concise. And number 3 would be correct. Now, I've put some techniques along with this as well to kind of help you think about what these actually mean. Clear. In order to be clear when you're dealing with someone, you want to specify, you want to verify, and you want to clarify. Here's a walk-away skill for you, and you could write this down if you find it to be valuable for you. You want to eliminate from your conversations and even your emails and written documentation, you want to eliminate phrases such as ASAP. I love the example I got from a speaker years ago named Jim Timmy, who wrote a time management book called Productivity Time. Jim Timmy said ASAP, most people believe, stands for as soon as possible. Technically speaking, the person you're talking to, when you say I need it ASAP, might define that as at some acceptable point. So now if we're looking for some output, is as soon as possible and at some acceptable point. Is that a same time? Is that the same clock? Is that the same outcome? Probably not. So you want to specify. If it involves a time, use a time. If it involves an amount, use an amount. Don't say, work this in. Because in the end, you'll see them walking away that afternoon and you go, hey, did you get a chance to do that? And they'll go, no, I didn't get a chance to work it in today. I was too busy. I'll get it for you tomorrow. Working it in provides them an option. I need this by 5 o'clock this afternoon, or this is something I need today. What's a good time to expect it? But actually establish a time that they can commit to and achieve. So specify clearly. Use a time, use a quantity, use an amount, use a direction. Verify it. Using phrases such as, let me make certain I said the right thing, or let's make certain we're on the same page, and then asking questions as to when they can achieve and when they can do and when you can get something is verifying, and that verification sets a goal. And if it sets a goal, then they will be able to achieve it. But if it leaves a vaguely specific outcome or a vaguely specific goal, there's no question in my mind they won't necessarily achieve it the way you want it, but they will achieve it exactly how they intended it. The difference being is their intention was not your perception, because there was a filter between those two components. So think about that as you move forward. Specify, verify, clarify. Let me repeat. Let me make certain. Is this what you're talking about? This is what I'm hearing. Am I on the same page? Little simple phrases like that will help you get the message consistent between sender and receiver. Be concise. Now here it says use behavioral terms. Let me explain what a behavioral term is. It's essentially telling them what you want them to do, as opposed to going around the block explaining how you normally do it, what you were thinking when you came up with it. This is what I mean when I say this. Just tell them what you want. Be concise. Get to the point. Give them the outcome you want to create. Remember, statistically, whether it's written, whether it's social media or whatever, we have short attention spans. It's almost a joke at certain levels about our attention span in the country nowadays, but it is true. Our attention spans aren't that long, and there's a lot of distraction. Essentially, from any communication you get, you're going to remember about 20% of it after that first interaction. Only about 20%. So let me ask you a question. What did they remember? What to do or what not to do? Think about that for a second. Where would you focus most of your attention if somebody's telling you they don't want you to do something? They want you to stay away from this concept. They want you to stay away from this idea. They want you to stay away from it. And then they tell you what they want you to do. But in that first interaction, where are you focusing most of your attention? Do you want to make a mistake? No, you're probably focusing it there. So let's keep that out of the mix. Speaking of behavioral term, tell them what you want them to do or give them instructions as to what you want them to do. Be correct. Know your topic. Understand your topic and actually be able to verify exactly what you want to do and how you want to work this to be correct. You want to ultimately know your topic and have your topic concise, to the point, and where you need to you can verify and validate it at any given time during the conversations. You want to make certain that people know and are confident that the information you're sharing has been researched, validated, and is accurate, not just your opinion or your perspective at that point. You want to make sure you have those things working. So let's move forward and talk about how messages are received relative to research. Now, this research was done a number of years ago by a guy named Albert Moravian, a professor from UCLA, and it actually changed the way we look at things. And it was a research on whether messages are shared mostly by verbal means or are they shared by nonverbal means. His outcome changed the way we did communication for years. Now, I think these numbers have probably changed a bit because we do a lot more writing, a lot more emailing, a lot more visual stuff through social media, as opposed to what we were doing when this research was done. But let's talk about the way it used to be, because we still have interactions, no question about it. And we want to make certain that our interactions are getting the message across. Essentially, Moravian found out that the vast majority of the message was not shared through the use of words. It was only 7% of the meaning, 7% through the use of words. That may have changed today because words are how we're really communicating with typing and writing and emailing and all that. 38% was our tone of voice, our intonation, and at that point, our intonation is that the way we sound, the depth, the richness, or the volume, the intonation, that sends more of a message than the actual words do. So when I go to a store and somebody says, "Hey, how can I help you today?" Do I really believe they want to help me? No, I really don't. Even if they say the right words, the intonation was not good. And then the last area is body language. 55% of the message that you share, particularly when you're face to face, is through your body language, how it looks, what goes on. How are you holding yourself? What's your posture? What's your facial expression? Those are the things you need to think about when you're interacting. Now, words, as we talked about, do have power, and more today than ever before. Remember, our words of today are no different than hieroglyphics of yesterday, of years ago with the Egyptians. They're just symbols. That's all they are. Our words are symbols, and the symbols have meanings. There are millions of words. Now, here's the problem with all languages, but primarily English. English is one of the most complicated languages out there. 5,000 or more words now have more than one meaning. 5,000 words have more than one meaning. 500 have an average of 26 meanings in each of those words. So I can say one thing, and you could literally hear 26 other options or 25 other options. And it may not be what I want you to understand or hear. So you want to think about that as you share your message, picking the right words, staying away from jargon, those type of things. Let's have a little contest, and this might actually be difficult. I'm getting a little cue here that I might be off the screen. Hopefully you can see the overheads though. The 7% impact with words comes down to two phrases. Am I trying to impress you with my vocabulary, or am I trying to express to you a meaning and an idea that we can work together with? Here's a cute little exercise that we used years ago in our seminars. And it was, it breaks down like this. If you want to raise your hand, I'll try to unmute your mic and you can answer this. These three things are common sayings. They're very common sayings. They're just written in a very, I guess, expanded vocabulary. So if you can read those and you know what it is, raise your hand. I'll click on the mic and you can tell us what that phrase actually is. I've got two participants raising their hands. Let me see if I can open one of these. This may or may not work. Three. Now I got three. And I'm going to have to tell you. Let's see what I've got. I am not able to go to get you on here.
Get off screen share.
Let me take you off screen share temporarily and see if we can unmute some mics out of this. Welcome to the world of technology. That is not going to work. So I apologize for that. I will go back to my screen share. We'll answer these. We'll just answer these questions. All right. Here are the answers to the questions. The first phrase, an ignoramus and his or her lucre are readily disjoined, is a fool and his money are soon parted. In the absence of the feline race, certain small rodents will give themselves up to pleasurable pastimes. When the cat's away, the mice will play. And a plethora of culinary specialists, be it the liquid in which a variety of nutritional substances have been simmered. That's too many cooks spoil the broth. So am I trying to impress you, or I'm trying to express to you? A lot of people tend to, particularly in this industry, the real estate, tend to use a lot of jargon. I don't know whether they use it knowingly and are trying to impress you, or they use it comfortably. It's just part of their language, and they forget that everybody out there doesn't necessarily understand the internal languages that happen within the industry. So it is very important that we make every effort to express our ideas with words that everybody will understand. I have a tendency in my emails, when I use an acronym of some sort, I will put what the acronym means in parentheses, particularly in maybe a first interaction with somebody. I don't make an assumption that everybody understands it, but I also don't make you feel like an idiot that you don't. I'll say something, you probably understand this, but I always like to make sure we're on the same page, and then I'll explain it. Or you're probably familiar with this, but I just found out recently what this meant, so I'm kind of proud of myself. Let me share this with you. I try to make certain that we're all speaking the same language. I did a project a number of years ago with a very large cooperative. It was 57 retail locations in the Washington, D.C. area. When I came in, I went out and did store location visits. Nobody knew me. I just kind of watched and see how things were working, how they were interacting with customers, what was being said, what was being done, look, sounds, and actions kind of thing, analysis. I suddenly realized that one employee would use one word to describe something. Another employee, maybe the sales guy, would have used another word to describe the same thing. And the cash out person would use literally a third word while cashing them out, talking about the same item. And inevitably, every customer became confused. So I created a dictionary, 100 words that every employee must know, and I put one definition with it. This is a walk-away skill, folks. You've got to speak the same language, and it can't be your internal language and your external. You've got to literally, when you're dealing with your customers or people who don't know, speak the language and make sure each person in that mix says the same thing to these to the people. Actually, and it works internally as well. Again, ASAP, or do it as quickly as you can, or work this in. Those all have multiple meanings to them. Make sure you're defining it among departments and among individuals as to what it really is and what time frame really exists, and you'll see problems go away very quickly. So, as hopefully you're getting some information as we're moving along here. I know we're moving at a pretty quick pace, but this is a short time frame, and I'm trying to kind of toss in a little bit of information. If anybody would like the PowerPoints that I have here, they certainly can send me an email and I'll get a copy to you. I also have a white paper on the 5 techniques or 5 issues that exist within the marketplace, and some techniques and strategies that you can use to effectively deal with those. If you want to send me an email, I'll send you that white paper as well. All right, let's do a little summary here. We've already talked about keeping it simple, keeping it straightforward, being concise. We've talked about being specific. Here are 3 additional key points to being a good sender and making certain that you're sending the right message. There's the next point is important. Out of these 5, I'm going to do the next 3. Important. This is important because people don't know what's important to you. So that phrase, "this is important because," is a very important phrase to add to your situation. When you're explaining a concept or sharing an idea, you may believe it to be the most important component ever or important thing ever, but unless you tell somebody how important it is, they won't know. And phrases like, "this is important," or you may want to write this down because I want you to remember this. This is something we all should remember all the time. Those little phrases add an importance and a value to it. Again, be correct. We did talk about that. Validate with evidence. It's very important to validate anything you say with some form of evidence. The type of evidence that I like when I'm dealing with people, particularly even communicating with in my personal life, is a third disinterested party that's viewed by maybe an industry or even within our personal relationships as somebody who is knowledgeable and skilled. So validate that with evidence. Validate that with evidence. Be congruent. Be congruent. Your words, your sounds, and your actions must match up. They must match up. If you say something, but your body language says something opposite, people obviously will interpret your body language to be more accurate and more true than your words. So you've got to make certain that you match up on all levels: words, sounds, and actions. Again, body language, just a little quick tip, since there is so much importance on body language, and I'm going to say it, we have moved to a very relaxed looking society, and I get the whole concept, and I understand the whole take me who I am. It shouldn't be my my look that you judge. It should be who I get that whole concept. I really wish it was true. We'd probably live in even a better place than we are right now. But we have to realize that it's not exactly 100%. There was a story years ago, and it's still relevant today. A young boy came home from school, and in this case, his mom was there already. Came home from her work. She met him there. He looked at her and he said, "Gee, Mom, why do you look so sad?" He goes, "I'm not sad." He goes, "Well, you look really sad." And she goes, "No, I'm not sad. Actually, I'm very happy." He goes, "Gee, somebody should tell your face." So your expression does send a message. Do you look happy? Do you look excited? Do you look interested? Are you you're standing up straight, or are you slumping over? I know there are physical ailments. I get that, and we can make exceptions for those. But if you're healthy, stand up straight. Stand up and look like you're ready to attack an issue, not be victim of it or be prey to it. Gestures that you use. Careful with your hands. I do talk with my hands a lot. I find it to help me express, to share my excitement, to share my energy. But be careful with it. Don't get too wide and too big, and careful what you do and what you say. Eye contact. Cultural differences make this a questionable thing. You know, being from the Washington, D.C. suburbs for about 10 years, that's a very culturally diverse marketplace. And you find people from other countries that do not look at eye contact like we do. So you do have to have a cultural understanding when you're using it. But in the end, I still believe here it does mean something to be able to look somebody in the eye as you're talking and presenting and listening. Give them eye contact when you're listening, when you're face to face. If you're on the phone, make sure you're not doing other things. That's why I'm not a fan of computer training. I really don't know what everybody's doing right now. Are you typing something else? I'm going to tell you right now, the mind can only be one place at a time. So unless you're focusing on what you're doing, you're going to fall under the old concept of if you try to accomplish everything, you're rarely going to achieve anything. So maintain eye contact, focus mentally, personal space. You know, with our COVID-19 situation today, our personal space situation has become more prominent and more thoughtful than ever before for obviously a very specific reason. But you need to be sensitive and aware of people's reaction as you move closer or move away. The bottom line is you want to respect their personal space and, of course, your vocal quality. Speaking too high, ear piercing, not good. Speaking so low, not good. We all have our voice and it is what it is, but you can also train it. You can also work with it, particularly when you're doing phone work. It's very important to have a good phone voice and know what your phone voice sounds like. So work at it, practice it, practice breathing, practice phrasing, practice articulating words. I grew up in the South. There is no ending. We can't drop off at some point. I traveled the country, 46 states, 6 countries, 3 U.S. territories. I learned to be very neutral, or at least as neutral as possible. And that seemed to bring me in more of a good, solid mix in a conversation with people than if I had some very strong accent regionally or, you know, from some area. There was some pushback sometimes. So I try to be as neutral as possible. That's your vocal quality. Now, one of the things we try to do to improve our communication skills is write things down. These are actual medical records. Just because you put something in writing doesn't mean it's going to work for you. I'm hoping you can see this because these are medical records that I don't think created the picture in the mind of the reader that the writer intended. For instance, on the second day, the knee was better. On the third day, it had completely disappeared. That doesn't sound like a successful medical procedure. The patient has been depressed ever since they began seeing me in June. At this point, I'm asking, who's the problem, the patient or the physician? Patient was released to outpatient department without dressing. That's going to be embarrassing. The discharge status was alive, but without permission. Yes, I've often found you have to have permission to be alive when you're at a hospital. So these kind of things are very interesting. I like the very last one. It makes sense. They put this in writing, and I guess they didn't proofread it, but the patient refused autopsy. I personally think that's the smartest patient in the world and is going to live a lot longer at this point. So think about, just because you write it doesn't mean you have communicated. Now, what I would suggest you do when you write something down, if it's not urgent and have to go out, let it sit there for a while, particularly if it's something that's sensitive, something that has some emotional content to it. Some emotional content to it. What I would say do is let it sit there, come back and read it a little later and with a fresh eye, or let somebody else proofread it. If they proofread it though, and you ask somebody to proofread it and do you a favor or service there, what you should probably never do is you should never pre-call what you want them to read. In other words, could you read this for me? Here's what I'm trying to say. Because when you tell them what you're trying to say, even if you didn't completely and concisely say it in the writing, they'll read into it because it's in their brain. You planted the seed. So if you want somebody to proof it, and to give you a fair and honest appraisal, just say, can you read this and tell me what you believe I'm saying? And then let them come back with the message. And if it's not what you wanted, you need to rewrite it. So think about that as a walk-away skill. Hopefully you're getting a few things here. I know this is common sense, but it's been said in the past, common sense rarely becomes common practice. In all honesty, I don't really care what you know. Knowledge is a dime a dozen. It's what you do with what you know that really matters. So sometimes a good review like this is actually useful and important. So we're kind of coming down to our little handout there. So at the bottom of page number 3 at this point, delivering communication. If you want to make certain that your communication is understood or you're understanding someone else, you're going to have to follow these 3 steps. These 3 steps increase understanding both for you and for the other party. First step is to listen. If you want, it's called the law of reciprocity. Whatever I put out tends to be what I get back, particularly when I'm dealing with people. People don't seem to realize that. If it's kind of like, oh, I want people to like me. Well, in order for people to like you, you got to be a likable person. And I found that in order to be a likable person, you've got to be capable of liking other people. It's the same thing. If you want, nobody listens to me. Well, you have to first start by how effective is your speaking skill, or how effective is your writing skill? How meaningful is the material you're trying to share? Are you relating it to them in any way to connect them to the message? I mean, in the end, you have to think about this. If they're not getting it, you're back to the sender part. Maybe you're not sending it well. But if you want people to be good listeners to you, you may start with being a good listener to them. How do you listen? Again, it goes back to the face-to-face, eye contact, lean forward, all those basics that we all know. And again, common sense is not always common practice. We may know it, but are you using it? So listening is important. Part of listening should be restating what they just said. Now, it doesn't have to be, well, let me tell you what you just said. Blah, 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 blah. I give it back to you, and I can do that too much. After a while, it drives people crazy. But occasionally, you may want to say, no, let me make sure I understand. Let me make sure I'm clear on that. That was new. That's new to me. Let me make sure I heard what I heard. And restate it so they can say, exactly. And now you go to a confirmation step. So you listen, you restate, and you confirm. Got it. What's our next steps? Could be a confirmation phrase on yourself. What's our next steps? Where do we want to go with this? What would you like me to do next? These are important confirmation phrases. Again, little simple things that we just fail to use can really add a lot of power to your communication skills. And they can bring in that person into the conversation where they walk away knowing and understanding better than before. Think about that. Think about that as we go forward. Now I'm going to do this last little part here because we're getting down to the last portion of our overheads and our section today. And I really appreciate you guys inviting me and being here. These are more CAM specific strategies. They work for everybody. But I kind of realized that while I'm on the ground, these are things that I've learned that do work better for me in the field than other methods. First off, you want to set expectations with everybody you come in contact with. That doesn't mean I'm going to tell you how you're going to work with me. Excuse me. Setting expectations may very well mean you're going to tell me how you want me to work with you. So it's just essentially a mutual exchange of expectations. I usually tell everybody, if I make a phone call to you, you're probably going to get an email a short time thereafter confirming what we talked about. I tend to back up everything. If you get an email, I'm probably going to give you a phone call during the course of the day, just to, number one, make certain you got the email, and number two, to answer any question you may have. I try to figure out how people are most comfortable with receiving the information. Do they like it in writing? Do they like me to tell it? Are they visual? And I try to relate to them. I try to understand them first, not just do it the way I like it. I love the old phrase. Well, if somebody treated me like that, that wouldn't bother me. Well, that doesn't necessarily matter. Because you relate to it doesn't mean they relate to it. And if they don't relate to it, there's a disconnect. So you want to set expectations, get expectations, and everybody being kind of on the same page as we move forward. You want to train your board members. If you're working certainly in the condominium association business and you deal with boards, we can all relate. I do appreciate being on the ground as much as I am now. I do appreciate some of the frustrations I've had as an owner dealing with my own CAM managers. I can see why they can get burned out pretty easily if you don't have good emotional control, if you don't have really sharp personal skills where you can deal with your customers and owners and board members effectively. It can be challenging. You can burn out quickly. So train your board members. Again, setting expectations, help them understand the rules. Help them understand there's a difference between what you want to do and what you think is logical and the statutes. This is an educational part. So you train your board members on how to be effective and achieve the results they want. And that's all they want to do is achieve results. Your job is to be that catalyst and help them do that. Train your homeowners. And how I train my homeowners in the rental properties that I do, as well as the board positions that I've held, is I created a document called the Condo Life. And every time somebody moved in, I would give them this handout after I said, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. Here's a handout called the Condo Life. It's going to cover the 8 most common issues that we deal with in the transition from the real world into the condo world. Read this if you have any questions, get back with me, but it should give you answers on where to go get an answer, what to do, and what works. It's eliminated problems tremendously, the Condo Life. Utilize, now in our overhead we call it a complaint form. I don't like to use the word complaint. Utilize a concern or question. When somebody says, I'll go to complaint, what's your question? Mike, that comes right out of my mouth there. So what's your question? I turn a complaint into a question only because a question doesn't have the same negativity as the word complaint does. I want to diffuse the energy, diffuse the emotion. It's a question. It's a concern. It's an issue. I get it. It's not a problem and it's not a complaint. Change the words, change the feelings. Tailor your message to the audience. I live in the Sun City Center area. The average age is 74. I'm at the lower end of this demographic. There are people at the higher end, then there's the middle range there. I have to realize that they don't see the world as I see the world. I'm closer to the Gen Xers than I am the traditional ages of this country, which is 74 and older. They grew up in a different time, a different place with a different mindset. They certainly have caught on and had to because it's been in a marketplace you have to. But in the end, I still see things differently. Now I have to relate to them. I don't have to be them. They don't have to be me, but I have to create an environment where they can relate to me. So you want to make certain that you tailor your message to your audience using their words and vocabulary and educating them on your words and vocabulary to expand everybody's understanding and connection. Think about that. Personalities do count. This is an entire program that we do on its own. Many people have done them. There are many versions out there. We are fans of Dr. Tony Alessandra's version called Relationship Strategies because it not only tells you about your own personality and who you are and what you do, it also tells you how to relate well to other personalities. That's a good how-to. He's the one who came up with the phrase, kind of challenging the concept or interpretation of the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, treat people the way you want to be treated, to treat people the way they need to be treated. And there's 2 things that determine who a person really is: their pace, how quickly they move within a topic, and their priority. Where do they place their value? You've got thinkers, relators, socializers, and directors. 2 of these are the opposites of the other. If you're a socializer, your opposite is the thinker. So there's always conflict. You have to work with that. If you're a relator, you're conflicting with director, because a relator wants to make everybody happy, make everybody feel good, not necessarily have conflict. The director doesn't care. Just get it done. Socializer wants to have fun while they're doing it and look at all these different things and do this different stuff. Thinker, get it done. Black and white. There is no option for failure here. I don't want to be bad. So you can see how those would push away, not attract. But technically speaking, and I'll leave it at this point, in communication, the socializer's weakness is the thinker's skills. The relator's weakness is the director's skills, and vice versa. If you learn how to work with those people that you most conflict with, you've just added a very valuable part to you. You've completed the whole, and you'll communicate much more effectively and much more dynamically. So let's move forward here. Very important part in the world we live in real estate. We certainly need to learn to deal with difficult people, and in all honesty, there's a ton of them out there. I want you to walk away with this. Please write this down and remember it. Most difficult people are more different than difficult. They're not really difficult. They're just different. They don't see things the way you do. They don't approach things the way you do. But we have this tendency to want to push our way onto them. They're pushing back. It turns into a conflict. You need to develop some difficult people skills. And again, these are whole topics in and of themselves. The first thing you need to understand is, what is a difficult person? That's a person who can't work with a consensus of people. If they just don't get along with you, that's really not a difficult person. Look at how they get along with many other people in the environment at work. If everybody else seems to get along with them and you don't, you may be a bit difficult yourself. So you're going to have to get back to understanding first and trying to relate, as opposed to being dominant first. So think about that. Another technique is use your voicemail to follow up your emails. Use an email to follow up your voicemails, because that all ends up being follow up and follow through. Follow up, make sure you did it. Follow through, make sure they appreciate or they understand or they got what they needed out of it, so everything has a beautiful conclusion to it. Return your calls promptly. That's the biggest thing I've gotten in this industry. I actually answer my phone. I have no fear of answering my phone. I have a capability of going, okay, no, that's not something I can handle, but let me get back to you on it. I can say no. I can certainly end a phone call. So return your calls promptly. It shows that you place importance on the people that are calling in to do business with you. Don't make assumptions. Don't jump to a conclusion. Make sure you base your thoughts and your results on some form of evidence or some sort of validation, and be willing to be open-minded to check that for accuracy. Use your email for documentation. There's CYA, which I believe stands for Cover Your Actions. If you want to put stuff in writing, you want to verify. I do this all the time with boards. What does the board decide? I need to have the board's decision. Please tell me what your next steps would like your next steps to be. I want that documentation. It's already, it keeps us all out of issues, and it gives us the ability to go back and say, no. We may have forget things over the time frame, but we certainly have them in writing to validate them. So provide worthwhile reports. This is an important one. Most reports are colorful. They're not necessarily useful. You want to make certain that your report has an end result that you're trying to share with it, and make that goal the purpose of having the report. If it's not doing anything except justifying your job, or you're trying to make somebody believe you're doing something. Here, I'm going to send you a report at the end of the week, and that way they'll think I'm doing something. It's like, that's the wrong reason to have reports. Reports should be there as evidence to show things were done, things were accomplished, things are still pending, things are hung up for some reason. They should be attractive. They should look good, but they should be useful and worthwhile. So make your reports tell the story without you even being there. Use your phone assistant to take notes, set reminders. You can do that with your Outlook as well. And of course, use your administrative personnel if you have those. If you're lucky and fortunate enough to have those, use them well. But use them the way it is. Go over job descriptions clearly. Make certain you're not giving them stuff that you should be doing. Make sure they're not doing stuff that you should be doing. And go forward from there. But use them effectively, and make sure you show that you appreciate the people that help you. Too often there seems to be an assumption that, I've got to get this done, so everybody should hover around me and make sure I get it done. Now you need to make sure you show the appreciation for all those people involved in your situation, and do things. And remember, if you're working in the condominium association, your condo docs are a very important piece of the evidence. Always refer back to that. Always go there. I tell you, tools that I've learned now that I'm using effectively, and I look back and go, how did I ever live without them? Snippet, the PDF editors, those kind of tools help you put things in emails and show pieces of documents without having to send the whole document. Keep your files accurate, keep your files clear. Now, this is time management, all that, but in the end, all these things that I'm sharing with you today, even though it doesn't sound like it has anything to do with communication, they're elements of communicating. They set up the attitude that people who you're connecting with will then listen to you. They help communication when you put this whole program together. Communication is not a one thing. It's a multitude of things coming together to create one outcome: better and shared understanding. So I thank you for your time at this point. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to try. And Scott, I'm going to get Scott maybe in this mix if I can, to take the helm back. Take the helm back. Let me stop my screen sharing and take the helm back. See if I can figure out how to send it back to you.
Can everybody hear me?
There, I can hear you.
Great. So I did get some messages during the presentation regarding a request for the PowerPoint and the white paper. So Ryan, I'll get with you and make sure we accommodate everyone who wanted that information.
Excellent.
I do want to thank you on behalf of the young professionals. I want to thank Sixto Guerrero, who is the committee co-chair with Bouchard Insurance, for the young professionals of making this connection and bringing you to us to provide this valuable information. So thank you for your time. And if anyone has any questions, if something comes to you later on, if you need Ryan's contact information, please feel free to reach out to me. I know most of you have my email. If not, it's on the website. And Ryan, I'll let you kind of wrap things up. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge today.
Scott, thank you. And 6-2, I certainly appreciate you guys having confidence in me to bring me in and share some information. I hope you guys got at least a small couple of walk-away skills you can use. We're certainly available. I want to get more involved in the chapter. There's a lot of good information out there that we still need to get, even though we believe that things have dynamically changed in the marketplace. It is my belief that people, they certainly are different. They have more access to stuff. People, from a psychological standpoint, still exist the way we always have, and we need to get back to some basics. And this is what we shared today, which is simply some small basics to really reach out and make a better connection and share information better. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here with you today.
Thank you, Ryan. And also to confirm, we are not in the same room, just in case people were wondering with the background here. But thank you to everybody.
Pointed out very quickly that our background looks exactly alike.
Way too similar. We got similar taste there, which I think is a good thing based on your knowledge. So again, thank you for your time, and we'll go ahead and close things out today. If anyone has any questions or would request more information from Ryan today, reach out to me and I'll make sure everyone gets that connection. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.